Cool. Super excited today to see everyone and loving to see all the folks on the call and then we'll obviously be sending out this recording. Hey Noam, good to see you. And Today we're going to be talking about the future of strategic research in an AI first world. And I'm super excited to be joined by Nikki Anderson, who I first met 4 years ago when my company, Great Question, was very junior. And I think we just started, and I was like looking for guidance on better understand the UX research space. Um, and Nikki is not only a user researcher, but also the founder of the User Research Strategist, the #1 user research newsletter on Substack, and the host of the User Research Strategist podcast. She's also currently working on a new book about category research, which I'm super excited about, which would be a guide that defines the strategic role of user researchers in shaping the future of businesses, which ties in a lot, I think, with what we're talking about today. Hi, Nikki.
Hey, yeah, thank you. Sorry for all of those. Like, I every single time I introduce my podcast, I have to be so careful. I'm like, welcome to the User Research Strategist podcast. And my poor
Yes.
podcast editor is just like, maybe you should have named it something different.
Too late now. Too late now. We're rolling with it. We're rolling with it. And Before we sort of get stuck in, I do want to say that we're actually going to do a giveaway. I've actually got two giveaways. I don't know if you can see it. Is my screen reversed? One is this amazing Great Question jacket, which I'll now model in all its glory. You stick around. Yeah, we're going to give away one of these. Hopefully it's not reverse. Especially good for this time of year. And the other is one of our running research t-shirts, which we do for the Great Question Run Club. I'm actually wearing one of these as well, but I'm not going to model it because it's too cold here in Oakland. We gave these away as part of the run club we did as part of UXDX in Dublin last year. We also had a run club in Mexico City as part of our offsite in October. We've got another one coming to UXDX in New York in May. So this is the only other way you can get it without going and running at least 5 kilometers with me somewhere in some obscure part of the world. Cool. So, Nikki, welcome. I guess most of the folks here will know you, but if you had to describe the mission of the user research strategist in one sentence, what would it be?
Yeah. So I feel like for me, it is empowering researchers to feel more confident in a strategic place within their organizations and to like move into that space where we are business partners. We're not just like tactical usability testers. We
Mm,
help create and foster a vision. That was more than one sentence. So done.
worth it. Worth it. Yeah, 100%. That's so awesome. I feel like that's definitely like that. That's where we need to go. That's where we need to go. That's super important. Um,
Yeah.
and so this is a big shift, I guess, since you've been supporting, sort of early career UX researchers through the User Research Academy, which I'm sure a lot of people will know you from. Why this move? And how do you think about the difference between the two platforms?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think that it has become really hard for people to get into the field of user research, not impossible by any means. It's always been a difficult field to get into, and I think it's just been made more difficult in more recent times. And it was hard for me to say, let me help you get into user research when I couldn't really help as much as I had been able to in the past. And what I saw was this potential evolution of user researchers who are more in that like mid-level senior space to engage more with businesses and to become more of that like partner in a business, like almost like an advisor, a strategic partner to businesses. And I was like, to be completely honest, that's where I like took off in my career. And I was like, this was super fun to do. And I want to help other researchers do that because I think that this is the time. And like, whereas like you can still 100% get into user research, there are a lot of really great people who are helping UXers or like new people get into the UX field. And I was like, I think I kind of want to like play that other game of like, all right, how are we evolving this role in a way that's positive for user researchers and also organizations? And so I think like that different lens has not only been like more fun and creative and like pushed me a lot more like to understand the role, but like I'm a practicing researcher and I need to practice
Mm,
these things too. Like
mm,
I'm in the field. I got there. It was a struggle and I got there, but like I want to like be able to like do what I talk about. And so it's
Yes.
fun for me to kind of like experiment with all these things and like bring the learnings back.
Love that. And maybe a certain amount of, you sort of, you really understand the materials, you really understand the strategy behind it by teaching it, by figuring out how to teach it. You're like, how do I actually think about that? How is that solved?
Yeah.
Which is awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot
Cool.
of iterating and failing. And I come back to people and I'm like, okay, I tried this like 4 times and I completely messed it up. Here was like the final version. Like this kind of worked mostly. Like I recommend this like kind of like advice. So it has been fun to like, I don't know, be more like experimental with research as well. And I think that that's like the place that we're in is like really, really experimenting and having a good time.
That's awesome. And uh, I guess I do want to pause as well. I kind of missed one introduction. I feel like we did your introduction. For everyone else, maybe you haven't heard of. My name is Ned. I'm all I'm doing is facilitating. I'm really just asking Nikki questions. She's the expert here. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Great Question. I've actually come from a product, and Great Question is an all-in-one customer research platform built to scale research across the enterprise. So we really focus on empowering not only researchers and research ops with our CRM, our data governance modules, and reporting, but also then empowering them to empower the people they work with, the PMs, designers, and marketers, to ultimately help facilitate research at scale, whether it's democratizing research insights or empowering everyone to run individual methods. And I'll talk about that probably a little bit more later. Um, so that's me. And I come from a product background, so forgive me. I feel like a relative novice to research, but I was very passionate about UX research in those roles and did a bunch of research, but more lowercase r. I never actually had the title. It was more, as a part of doing pricing strategy for B2B SaaS companies and building my own companies as well as, better understanding customers. Okay, so I want to shift to now talk a little bit about, at a very high level, what would you say are the top 2 or 3 impacts of AI on the UX research industry? Help me understand the shift.
Yeah,
Yeah.
diving right into it.
Let's
It's
dive
like
in. Let's rip in. Yeah. The light dots. Yeah.
the band-aids off. Yeah, so AI is interesting. I remember when ChatGPT became a thing, and I distinctly remember I was like sitting down with some like product and UX people, and I was like, ChatGPT is so dumb. Like I was like, it's just gonna like fizzle out. Like just like me and my crystal ball, which is just the most useless thing. It's like one of those magic 8 balls that you shake that never works. Right. And so like I was like, yeah, this is so dumb, whatever. And then I was like, oh, it's not dumb. Like people are actually like using this. And so I think that we had like a big moment where we were like, well, UX is dead. Like there were literally like articles that was like UX is dying and or already dead, like 6 feet under by like we're gone. And I think that what happened is with any sort of change, and I've seen this throughout the past like 11 years, is like we get scared of things that we don't understand. And with AI, essentially like we can be scared of it, but I think that AI is actually something that's going to help us a lot with making our roles more strategic as researchers. So I think that actually aids in the shift. Like Ned, when you were saying like, hey, great question helps with like scaling research across an organization, democratizing research, democratizing insights. That's the stuff that like we need to start embracing a little bit more because I know we've always been like, no,
Mm.
no to
Mm.
democratization, no to like AI. And it's like, okay, these things are here with us. Let's shift our mindset on how we can actively use them in a positive way. And I think that that's like the shift that needs to happen is we need to like say, how do we use these for good? Because like
Mm.
if we look at the greater like scope of tech isn't always good, but how do we use tech for good? Right? How do we use
Mm.
AI for good? How do we use democratization for good? And I think it's really trying to understand those points and work together with our stakeholders to like come up with a plan that feels good for everybody. I don't
Mm.
know if that even like answered the question because you asked me for 2 or 3 things and I gave you like something else.
No, I love that. I think that's even a prompt, and we're getting some questions in the chat, which I'll come to in a second and weave in. But Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, the reality is that the AI side of things, one, it's an inevitability. There is no escaping it, that it is here. We can't close our eyes and put our head in the sand and wish that it goes away. It's here. And so now what changes in this post-AI world? Well, ultimately, we probably need to be thinking more strategically, and we should be thinking about how we can leverage it. I love the jujitsu example, right? This big strong man is coming at you. You've got two choices, right? You're either going to get your ass kicked, or you're going to figure out how to twist them in a way to get them out of the way, leveraging their force. It's the same thing. It's like, cool, it can take away a bunch of drudgery work for us. That is awesome. But we obviously need to look at it with a skeptical eye. But again, the reality of it is that it's here, which is similar to democratization, right? And so, how can we leverage these new concepts to our advantage?
Yeah, yeah. And I love that you said like look at it with skepticism. It's like I view AI as like Wikipedia page, right? Like
Mm,
I'm not going to go to a Wikipedia page and be like, this is truth, right? Because
mm,
it's fed in from so many different sources. Same with AI. Like
mm,
let's just look at it critically, like we should be doing with pretty much any information that we find on the interwebs.
mm,
Because
mm,
not all of it is great, right? But yeah, I think it's definitely about embracing these things and really truly understanding how we can make them work for us.
mm. Yeah, and I think it's also so early, so now is really the time to be jumping into it, even though it has the problem of maybe being inaccurate. It's got, we all know that there's some limitations that exist with the technology. It's progressing so quickly that a lot of those problems are going to go away or already gone away, and it's becoming amazing. Vaguely related, I would recently discovered that when the automobile was invented, we take a lot of things about cars for granted that actually they've been very similar for a long period of time. When the automobile was first invented, in fact, for the first sort of like 15 years or so, I believe, don't quote, maybe this is what I read on Wikipedia, they didn't have indicators. And so people would be driving down, and when they wanted to signal that they were going to change lanes, they would put their hands out the window, like you would in a bicycle, to say, hey, I'm going right, I'm going left, or whatever. And then that was then replaced by a flag system, effectively semaphore, where you pull these levers and flags would pop up to indicate you do it. And eventually we got to the point where we had electricity built in, and we had blinkers on and the blinker cans and things like that. And so you look at that technology, which obviously changed the world in so many ways, right? Eliminated the horse, transformed the landscape of I want to say America, but really the world. And so, like, cool. What is the analogy then here for AI? Anyway, I guess I don't know if there's anything more you want to say about that, or maybe we can talk a little bit more about like how is it kind of reshaping the role of the UX researcher?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I love that. I love like learning random tidbits of information like that because like everything evolves and changes and we just need to like understand that like tech isn't going to be any different, right?
Mm,
Like nobody could have imagined a car, let alone indicators. Like nobody could have really imagined AI as it is now, nor what it will be in the future. And so I think it's just like, yeah, figuring out how to be like, all right, this is how it works now. Like, let's just do this. But like, I think that what is beautiful about it is that it can help us with focusing on things that to like kind of I like to overlay these two things that are important for your career as like a researcher and like you progressing in your career, but also in addition to that, things that are really important to the business. So like the ideal world is that your personal goals and the business goals overlap. And the fact that like you want to learn how to do generative research better and like the business is like, "Oh my gosh, yes, we want generative research to help us understand our users better," right? That's not always the case, but like AI will help us. And like, I use AI all the time in my research practice. So I truly use it. Like, yeah, I use it all the time. And it has freed up time for me to actually think. And for a very long
mm,
time, as a user researcher, I didn't have time to think. And I forgot how important it is to have that time in our day because user research, science, yes, art as well. And if we don't have that creativity, if we don't have that time to think, and we're bogged down by all of these administrative roles, which many of us are because many of us are on small teams, solo user researchers. So we're doing research, research ops, participant recruitment, we're librarians, we're like literally everything that we can be under the world. Like this can take some of that burden away so that we can think and do more creative stuff and put in effort to places that needs to be put into. So I think that it can completely reshape researchers. And I think that we as researchers can then utilize AI to shape the roles that we want.
Mm, mm. Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Um, uh, I'm thinking about it in my own kind of work, which is diverse, and some of it is research related, but some of it is like crafting company strategy and pricing strategy and things like that. And um, uh, I've used it. I've built my own GPTs to help me with this sort of task. I ask it questions. Now, I don't rely on the output and say this is 100% accurate. I have to feel like I need to read every line and re-interrogate it. But it's at least opening up my brain to think about these things in different ways that maybe I wouldn't have considered before. One small example of prompt I feel like I use all the time is, describing the task. Hey, look, I'm rewriting our pricing strategy, trying to figure out how to go and communicate it best to the team and evaluate any risks that I might have here. Can you give me a list of risks that I should maybe be thinking about in this pricing strategy? And what it comes back with is, yeah, super helpful prompts versus necessarily something I'm going to put out into the world. Um,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's really important to uh think about the way that I think about AI is it's a thought partner. I don't ask it for an answer. I ask
mm,
it to help me with thinking about things. And what that does is if I'm super stuck on something, it gets rid of that blank page syndrome. So that's
mm,
something that I can get
mm,
stuck with quite a lot, where I'm just like sitting there being like, I can't even like organize my own thoughts. And normally, like, I'm a very like analog person, so I like to write things down and like whiteboard and take notes and everything like on paper, because like digitally, like, it just makes me freeze. But like what AI does it kind of like helps, just like, it's like that first seed, like 90% of it is crap, but like 10% of it, like, there's some good stuff in there where I'm like, oh yeah, interesting, and then I can take that, and then it like just helps me get started. So
mm,
yeah, I love that. It's like the output, we're not looking for answers, right? It's like, let's just get started. Let's brainstorm. Like, let's have a thought
mm,
partner.
mm. Yeah, and we've used it. There's a question in the chat which I'd love to hear your answer here on, which is from Delio. Says, when you mentioned time to think, can you give us some examples and what kind of tasks or reflections are those? It's about learning of different methods, for instance,
Mm.
which I guess is maybe what are you using your thinking time for now that AI takes it away? I think for me, just as one example of things that I'm using it for is we're doing a survey, writing right now writing a sort of some market research around people's views on democratization. I know there's a bit of fatigue around democratization, but trying to like understand how people think about the role of research and changing thoughts on researcher effort scores and things like this. Anyway, let's write a great quality draft of the survey, a great quality draft of how we might communicate it. Now, absolutely, now I need to go and find a really senior researcher to help me actually go and read through it, but I've at least given them a direction to go and start with. Um, yeah, anyway, but coming back to this question is, what are you spending this extra time on now? Like, what are the things that the research can't do? Oh, sorry, the AI can't do.
Yeah. So something that I love to think about, especially recently, is like, what are some, so like, I'm constantly like, what are some fun and creative ways, some different ways that I can engage my stakeholders better? Right. So like, I will sit
Mm,
down and I'll be like, okay, like, what, like, how can I go about and like make this next study that's coming up like super engaging for them? Like, is it drip feeding them insights like via Slack or whatever messaging system every once in a while? Like, or how can I like take this, like, sometimes what I do is like mini retrospectives on my work. It's like, how can I take this old report that I did and make it better? Right. So like, what's one thing that like I kind of sucked at that like I want to improve upon? And also, like, I do a lot of like stakeholder satisfaction surveys, right? So like after every single study that I run, I send a stakeholder satisfaction survey where I essentially am trying to like understand, like, what did I mess up in? Like, what do they need from me better? And like, it's really hard to find time to like do that and then improve in that if you're constantly like running around doing admin work. So that's like a really great thing to be able to think about, is like, I'm like, okay, well, like, my insights weren't as clear, or like they didn't feel as actionable. Okay, like, let me actually take some time to think about what that means, and then I might have
mm,
time then to go and talk to the stakeholder and interview them and get even
mm,
more information, and then I can like rework it and take it and like test it with them. And so it's just like, It's not always just like sitting and thinking and being like, the future of research. Like sometimes it
Mm.
is. And like sometimes it is learning new things and reading, right? So I think that use it for like what I do is like all those things that like I have two things. So I have a can do list. So I don't have a to do list. I have a can do list. I stole that from somebody and I should credit it. But I can't remember right where it came from, but it's not was not my idea. I got it from somebody else. So I have my can do list and then I have my wish list of all the things that I wish I had time to do. And when I have time, that's when I look at my wish list.
Mm. Love that. Love
Yeah.
that. Great. I'll shift gears because I know there's a lot of stuff we kind of want to get through, and we might have to save some of these questions for the back end. But do keep the questions coming. We are tracking them, and we'll have plenty of time for Q&A at the end. And I also welcome comments. Like, don't feel like I think this is the only forum in the world where I'm soliciting questions and comments. Normally, you're like, don't give me a comment, just get to the point. But the chat is going to open that up. I guess. Like how do you think researchers can balance like leveraging this AI with maintaining a more human-centered approach to research? I think you kind of covered it on there a little bit. And maybe you might give me an example of specific AI you're using in this. Yeah.
Yeah. So as I said, I don't look for AI to give me answers for things, right? So balancing the like AI aspect and the human aspect for me hasn't been particularly difficult because I'm not asking AI to do research for me because I saw somebody sneak in a question about synthetic users, which we can get to later on. But like it's very rare that I will have any, like, I just don't have AI like do things that I know that it's not capable of, right? So like it's just there are human nuances to user interviews, right? So if I sit down, like AI couldn't do this. It could not
Mm,
do what we are
mm,
doing, right?
mm,
Because we are humans with human experiences bringing human nuance. And maybe we could have a notebook LLM, right? Is super cool and like could do a great overview of this, but it's not
mm,
going to have all
mm,
the human nuance. So whenever there's a space where I'm like, I would miss out on humanness,
mm,
I don't tend to use AI for it. Right.
mm,
So like a prompt, for instance, that I would use instead is more for like, it's more in like the planning stages of things that I tend to use AI or in like the reporting. So
yes.
I might upload a report that I've created and say what like a prompt that I love to use, especially here in Jersey. So I do consultancy work here in Jersey and the Channel Islands, and nobody knows what UX is. And so something that I always put into either like my proposals or my planning or even reports is what pushback am I going to get? Like
Mm,
list
mm,
out the pushback that I'm going to get from my stakeholders based on this information, right? List out the questions that people will have. List out kind of similar, Ned, to what you were saying, like list out all the risks for this plan. List out everything that can go wrong. And like I use it in that way to kind of like try and like get ahead of what might be coming. Um,
mm,
or like a list, I love like list out all the concerns that stakeholders might have based on this research plan. And that's always like those kinds of prompts are so super helpful because they AI can sometimes be good at highlighting blind spots and things that you might not know or notice. And I think that that is a really nice way to use it versus saying, hey, what would, at home moms hoping to do yoga on a daily basis want from our app? Like maybe you could ask
mm,
that, but
mm,
like you're probably going to get pretty crappy stuff out of it,
mm,
like
mm.
generic stuff, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love that. And I think what you're talking about is particularly important for folks that are solo researchers or
Yeah.
solo research ops or on small teams where you might not have colleagues you can go and run these things by that can help you get better at your planning, right? Hey, what am I not thinking about in this planning? Or equally on the back end, how could I better synthesize this or help me to figure out a right way to distribute it to get more insights? Um, yeah, I think or more better feedback from my stakeholders. I think that's awesome. I think also that I agree with you. Double down on the is AI going? Is actually AI going to be running all of the research for us? Maybe. I've looked at pretty much every AI moderated, research tool out there on the planet. And look, it does have a place, but I'm like, am I going to be able to build rapport with a phone tree? Ultimately, is kind of the thing. It's like maybe at some point, but I think there is that is a great role for a human to play to go and figure out all the threads that need to be pulled that are popping up and taking in the tone of voice and emotion and facial recognition and things like that. And maybe one day that'll go away. I think my view is when that goes away, we've got bigger problems in the world. We're all going to be turned into gray sludge at that point. So in the meantime, let's keep going. Thanks, Pete. See you soon. Cool. Look, let's switch on a little bit let's talk about democratization. We're kind of skirting around this, the dreaded D word. Feel free to throw tomatoes in the chat as we talk about this. So I think one of the big challenges we kind of see in the industry is kind of this push towards democratization, and which we define as non-researchers conducting research. But I think at its most granular level, it is democratization is about empowering non-researchers with insights, like even democratizing the insights that we're generating throughout the organization. How do you think AI is contributing to democratization for better or for worse?
For worse, people will just go and look stuff up on AI. If you're like, no, I don't have time to do this, like there is like there is a possibility. So I remember I was doing some consultancy work here last year, and the scoping of the project was like too big based on something else that I had to do. And they were like, oh, it's fine. We'll just ask ChatGPT like what we should be doing. And I was like, oh, wow. Okay. All right. All right. So I think like for worse, like it can give a false sense of understanding of things that we shouldn't be giving our confidence to, right? So it can give a very false sense of like, oh, well, like I understand our users. And like the thing is, though, we've had the same version of this time and time again, because I know a lot of companies that I worked with where stakeholders would say, well, I know our users. But it's just now somebody saying, I know our users because I went onto AI and asked them, rather than just saying, I know our users because I'm one of the users. I know our users because I started the company. I know our users because I've been at this company for 10 years. It's literally just the same things that we've been dealing with over and over again. AI just seems scarier because it's a new way for people to know our users, right? But we've combated it for years and years and years. And so I think that while it can be scary and bad, people will look things up anyways and pretend that they know things, or they'll do a study with one person and say, well, I know our users now because this one person said that they loved our feature. So like it came
guilty.
It like came in other ways, like it's not new stuff. But with AI now, what we can do is take away some of this like admin work so that we can free up our time to do more research, to help others understand or empathize with people better. Like we generally will and can have more time with that. So like if it takes me 5 hours to create a research plan, normally manually, right? Let's say it takes me 5 hours. If I utilize AI to create a research plan, which I've done before 100% as like a draft, that took me that halved the time at least. Right. And so now I'm like, well, what do I have to do with these 2.5 hours? Yeah, I could go watch some like Love is Blind. Yeah, of course, that would be fun. But like, no, instead, what I should be doing is saying, okay, like, maybe I could write a whole nother research plan for another project. Right. So like, I think that there's pros and cons to everything. Right. But I think it can really open up our time to like include more research and be able to do more. And also, if I have given my stakeholders prompts to help them create their own research plans. So that's a whole nother level there.
Yep. Yeah, I think I love all of that. And I think kind of the underlying message there is that, or one of my beliefs is that AI and democratization is actually going to lead to then a need for an order of magnitude more researchers and research ops people. I think we're going to need significantly more than we ever have before. And the reason why that is that a vast majority of research more research is going to be enabled, right? Once we have all these guardrails in place and able to support people to run higher quality, relatively low level research, in my view. Spicy take. All right, come at me. And therefore, I think what it's going to do is, one, there's going to be a far greater need for the ops side of things to go and support this, right? How do we support 10xing the volume of research being done across an organization, potentially a far greater multiple? But then also, we're going to allow, at its most extreme, we might empower a PM intern as a former PM. Ragging on PMs is my job. Allow a PM intern to go and run something as complicated as a conjoint analysis to try and figure out the pricing for some new feature they're going to launch. Imagine a world where we could make it easy for them to do this. They're going to get an outcome. That outcome is probably going to be middling at best, but it's going to help them understand that there actually is an amazing method that could help them get to an ideal price point or pricing and packaging solution. And now imagine what it would look like, what the outcome would look like if we had a researcher actually conducting it. And so I think it's actually going to expose people to these ideas that maybe they haven't thought of before, and maybe get some sort of baseline, measure that then no CEO in their right mind is going to say, great, let's go with the conjoint analysis the PM intern did. They're going to be saying, great, now let's go and get the professionals in, get out of the way, and let's get the professionals in to actually go and run thorough analysis that we're going to go and hang our hat on because it's going to change the trajectory of the business. So that's my view.
I love that. Spicy take.
apparently, yeah. Cool. And so I guess, what do you think? Maybe you can think about this, like how to talk about this. How do you think that researchers should be thinking about AI to, really integrate it into their workflows and use it as a complement to their role? Should folks be using just ChatGPT? Should they be using more specialized tooling? You talked about Notebook LM and the possibility there. And maybe anything around, like, how are you even managing these sort of prompts, or is it really sort of this ad hoc sort of thing for you right now?
Yeah, so I'm generally a ChatGPT user, but like I've used Claude, for instance, as well.
Mm-hmm.
And as I mentioned, Notebook LLM, and I know that there are some AI tools embedded into just general research tools. But I think that you the whole thing is like there's no real easy answer about how AI fits into your process, because you need to figure out how it fits into your process, and you can literally ask AI how it can help you. Like they're like it's actually helpful in thinking about
Mm-hmm.
different ways. Like I know it's a bit meta. I went on to like ChatGPT and asked ChatGPT to create a Midjourney prompt for me because I couldn't get Midjourney to like create the image that I
Mm-hmm.
wanted it to
Mm-hmm.
create. So I'm asking AI to prompt AI now, because like that's just where we are. And I think that like I think that it's kind of about figuring out where in your process are you wasting time. Like go through your process and audit it and
Mm-hmm.
figure out where are you wasting time? Where are there like admin where's their admin work that isn't feeling good, that feels like it can be more efficient, that you need help with, that you need a thought partner with, that you wish that you had. It's like all the things where I'm like, wow, I wish I had a friend or a colleague or a peer or a coach to ask these questions to, right? I want those, like I need help, I need thoughts, I need brainstorming, and I usually use that as an indicator to like, okay, like maybe I can like think through this with AI. And I think that it's about finding the tool that works right for you. Like ChatGPT for me just generally like resonates, and I've put a lot of effort into learning ChatGPT. Like Ned, you mentioned like making custom GPTs. I've also like made custom GPTs as well that are like super customized, and I've spent hours like training these little GPTs, like and it takes a really long time, and I've taken courses on how to use ChatGPT specifically. So that's why I kind of went off into that direction, because I was like, well, I've put a lot of like effort and time into this. But it's really about thinking about like, okay, like where are those places that you're wasting time, that you need more support in, that you want brainstorming help with, that you want thought partnership with. Like audit your process and figure out, okay, where can I get help, and how
Mm-hmm.
can AI help me? And you can literally say, how can you help me? with this in
Mm,
an
mm,
authentic way. And like I always push ChatGPT. I'm quite mean. I like started out like really nice. Like I always used to say please and thank you, and now I don't say that as much, that's for sure.
mm.
But like I say to it, I'm like, okay, great, that's a level 1 answer, make it a level 2 answer.
Mm.
Right. Okay. Well, that's a level 2 answer. Okay. Make it a level 3
Yes.
answer. Right. So like you have to keep pushing it and pushing it. And so I would recommend saying, okay, I've audited my research process and I need help on this, this, and this. How can you help me?
Yep. Yep. Yeah, and love that. And I do something similar. And my example, actually not really research related, but I want to give it in here to give you a sense of how I've used it. It's actually really easy to go and create your own GPT. In fact, you can go to OpenAI and just ask AI, hey, I want to create a GPT that does X, Y, and Z. How would you go about doing it? And we'll give you great instructions. And then you can be like, can you be more tactical? Tell me more, more, more. And it'll give you the full instruction list. I went and created one. It took me 15 minutes. And what I created one for was we work with a lot of enterprise companies. And I was like, look, I want to, we get all these red lines. People say, oh, look, we don't want this clause in, that clause in there. And it takes a lot of back and forth and legal. So it's not UX research related, but hopefully you'll get some nugget from this. And so I went and I got a standard legal agreement, and then we have a playbook about things that we might shift on and not shift on. I fed those both into this GPT, and I said, hey, review every time I upload a doc to you. I want you to review it against these guidelines and our standard ones. Tell me what's changed, how severe the change is, and whether or not you recommend I should accept the change or argue against the change, and what an argument might be against the change. Now, it then comes back and reviews all of these redlined agreements and tells me a really thorough breakdown analysis of it. Do I rely on that as the only thing I do? No. I actually send it still to our external counsel and get them to review it, but it's given them some guidelines, some pre-thought on there, and has saved us a huge amount of time. And so I wonder, a similar thing you might go and do is maybe you get a plan submitted, a research plan submitted from someone on your team. You could create a GPT that gives you the standard sort of feedback you would give to someone, and you get it, you put it in, and it's going to pump out a summary. We do this internally where we review people's communications and we say, give it a score, give it a letter mark. I mean, often it'll be like, that's a C. Here's how you go and get it to an A, right? Great. If you can go and train a GPT to do this, you've massively streamlined your time and your ability to go and democratize research, because this is relatively low-level work, allowing you to go and work on the more strategic stuff, and actually having impact across the organization. Um, uh, and so I wanted to give a couple of examples of how we use how you can use Great Question for some of these things. As people talking about tools, a little bit self-serving, but hopefully this is relevant. One is we have this Ask AI functionality, which is awesome. So you go and run an interview. We grab the you can schedule the research through Great Question, whether it's an interview, a survey, or prototype test. But in the case of an interview, we'll transcribe it. And then we'll create a summary of the interview. We'll also break it down into chapters, so you can click on individual chapters to say, take me to the point where we started talking about X topic or Y topic. It does that for you. You can then go and tag up the interview itself, and that's helpful. But once you've got to the end of a study, we can use Ask AI across this whole study itself. And so we ran a study about 18 months ago around our new unmoderated prototype testing functionality. And it was really asking people, trying to better understand what the market is, what the opportunity is, how people felt about their existing unmoderated prototype testing tools. One thing we didn't ask during that study was about pricing, but it did come up in some of the interviews. And so I was able to use Ask AI to say, hey, what do people talk about around pricing? How do they feel about pricing of competitive tools? What do they think ideal pricing should be? And it was able to give me a summary back of what everyone said. And people were giving us actual prices. They were saying, this tool is very expensive. This tool is more affordable. Here's the exact price that we're paying for it all. And it gave me a summary. It then linked back to the people that had mentioned those particular prices. It even gave me quotes. And anytime there was a quote, I could click on that and it would play back the clip from that point. The next version we haven't released yet, we'll basically create a video summary of the Ask AI answer with the customer insight. So you can verify that it's not hallucinating and get an asset that you might go and share with other people on your team to give them a real visceral understanding about the problems you're experiencing. So that's one. Two things that we've got coming up is one, the ability to use AI to go and create customer segments. So you might say, hey, help me find enterprise customers that have been giving us feedback on pricing, and it'll actually help you automatically go and create that segment and title it and things like that. It's going to save you a ton of time, particularly for researchers, but let alone for non-researchers who maybe aren't used to spelunking through, find the right filters to go and find the right audiences. And then the second is actually the ability to go and create a study from scratch. And so effectively creating not only a study plan, right? So you're like, I want to understand what enterprise customers think about pricing, and create a little plan for it, but then go and set up the screener, go and find the right segment, go and think about the number of people, the sample size, incentives, how you might go and share it out. Basically, create the whole thing, and then it can still be reviewed by a researcher who will approve it. But you've just gone and saved so many steps in that process that otherwise would require a lot of hand-holding and coaching people along. And that's that. Happy to talk more about that. Let's shift on to talking a bit more about, I guess, positioning for strategic leadership. So I think traditionally, experienced researchers handled all the strategic work, while juniors on the team might have handled some more of the tactical research. And now I think that's sort of now, the tactical research is sort of being pushed to the edges of a lot of organizations with the advent, I guess, of democratization. I guess with now AI now automating much of that work, like how are junior researchers going to stand a chance? How are they going to find a role when actually maybe we don't need them? Or maybe put it a different way, like how can junior researchers build their skills and maybe position their skill set to go and work in these organizations?
Yeah, so I think that junior researchers, so something that I realized after being in the field for quite a long time, when I started working with like junior researchers, I was like, oh my gosh, you have such like new brains. Like you haven't been in this field like for like an immense amount of time, just being like, well, now I hate everything, right? Or like, oh, well, we have to think this way or that way. And so I actually think that people who are newer to the field have like this like, I don't want to call it like the puppy dog excitement, but like there's like this excitement and there's this like out of the box and like slightly more creative thinking that I feel like it's like as kids, we're super creative and we're like, oh my gosh, fun things because we don't have bills to pay. Right. And I feel like as like junior user researchers can be like, wow, there's like, what about this? What about this? What about this? Oh, like, and I'm stuck in my ways. And this other person comes who's not done this. And they're like, well, why are we doing it this way? And I actually have to be like, well, why are we doing it this way? Like, does that even make sense? And so I think that like junior user researchers can definitely position themselves first as like people who are coming in with like fresh eyes, with fresh perspectives, right? They've learned new things recently. They are newer to the field, which actually is a huge advantage because you might be learning something new and different. Whereas me here, like old lady over here, 11 years in, I'm sitting here being like, yeah, well, I really want to do it this way with this process. And somebody else is coming in and being like, well, what if we break that a little bit? Right. So I think junior researchers can definitely position themselves like in that way of like, hey, I'm going to come in and I have all this new knowledge and like this new stuff where I can kind of like sit back and question these processes, right? Because we're always going to need help with process. So I think that being new to this field might be scary, but like you will always have something new to bring. You are always different. You always have a new perspective. You have your unique experiences. So never forget about that. And like additionally, like just because you're a junior user researcher doesn't mean that you have to sit there and do like usability testing on somebody who had an idea in the shower, like who was like, oh my gosh, like this is the best feature that we're going to do. Hey, Joe, go and like test it for us and tell me how great of an idea of it is, like just because you're junior doesn't mean that you're having to do that. So I think like don't put yourself into a box of like I only can do usability testing. Like go and learn all of these other methods. Like there are so many important evaluative research methods that like are outside of usability testing, right? Like it's like, okay, let's do first click testing, let's do card sorting, like let's look at like sense making, let's look at information architecture. And like there are just so many things you can do as a user researcher. So like I would say try not to worry too much about like being junior. Like it just means that you have less experience. It doesn't mean that you only have experience in like doing one thing, if that makes sense. So like
Love that.
yeah, widen the scope. Like 2025 for me is like I need to have a good time. Like 2024 was tough. Like, you know, like it was not fun. Like, I don't think anybody had a great time in 2024. Like maybe some people did, but like it wasn't the most fun year in my record books. And I'm like, we need to like be creative. Like, remember paper prototyping? Paper prototyping was like the shit. Like, sorry for swearing. It was awesome. Like, I miss paper prototyping so much. Like, I love that stuff. Like just the stuff that we did. Like, let's get back into that. Like, that's why we need time to think, to be creative, to have this fun. It doesn't matter what level you are. You can do that no matter where you are and what role and level of experience you have.
Love that. Love that. And I think just to Num's point here in the chat as well, like, the beauty of AI is that it can help the junior folks show up much more senior than they would previously, which is a blessing and a curse to some extent. But also they're part of this AI native generation where, others are AI immigrants, which I love. Never heard that before. But that's a huge superpower. And I think that the two sides to that I would encourage folks is think about what is the AI research project or how you're leveraging AI that's a part of your portfolio, right? And I think that's just as important for juniors as it is for seniors, to have something there, because that's definitely a question that I'm asking as we're hiring people is like, hey, how are you leveraging it in your role, no matter what the role is, and even more critical, I think, for this function.
Yeah.
Um,
I
uh,
would also say like, a different generation. Like, I know millennials. I'm a millennial. Like, I
mm,
understand millennials. Like, I don't understand Gen Z. No offense to
mm,
anybody who's Gen Z. I just don't, I don't get it. Like,
mm.
you're like, so junior people actually bring like a really interesting perspective of like how things, like, I remember I did a Gen Z study on fashion inspiration, and I was just like, I don't get it. Like, I can't get it. Like, I just like, I don't understand the mental models. And it was so interesting. But like, having all these like different ages and different perspectives, I think is like a beautiful thing.
And so, I want to sort of, conscious of time, but we've kind of got a few last sort of questions here, that I want to sort of get through.
No offense.
One is, so I'm going to ask these questions. I'm going to get you to pick one of them to go and focus on. So we've got like, questions around like what key skills will UX researchers need to position themselves as more strategic leaders?
Mhm.
But also like what opportunities does this transition open up for researchers to better influence business decisions and drive innovation? And I guess how can organizations prepare for the evolving demands of the research industry? So maybe we start on the first two,
Yeah.
around like what do you need to develop to go and better position yourselves as strategic leaders, and what opportunities does it open up to be more strategic?
Definitely. So I actually like am in the process of getting like essentially MBA, because I don't understand, or I haven't truly understood business as much as I wish that I could have. And I wish
Mm,
that I had done that earlier on. Now, I'm not telling anybody to go and get an MBA because that would probably be like generally a waste of time and money. But like, what
mm,
I would really recommend doing is like truly like the place to kind of like get into this more strategic space, I feel, is understanding businesses. That means going and talk to people in your organization who work on like business, right? That might be the C-suite, for instance. That might be a VP, that might be a director. I'm not sure. Identify those
mm,
people and understand like every business is there to make money. Sorry, not every business. Most businesses are there to make money, right?
mm,
Which is great, because if they don't have money, we don't have jobs, right? So
mm,
we want businesses to make money. So it's very important for us to understand like what is the point of the business? What is the business trying to accomplish? And how do we speak that language and then translate that into research that helps support the business? I am also all for supporting the user. So before that goes off, it's like
mm,
we want to find that sweet spot between supporting the user and supporting the business. And so I really, really think that like we won't always get that balance correct. It's impossible to 100% always support both. Sometimes we have to go in one direction more than the other.
mm,
But I truly believe like start learning about business. And if you hate business, try and find
mm,
something fun about it, right? Like
mm,
try and say, okay, well, like I just like, because I hated business. I was like, this is dumb. I hate numbers. I hate money because it's annoying, right? Like, but hey, here we are. This is our position. And if we want to
Mm,
like become more strategic, if we want to have that seat at the table, we have to understand business. Without
mm,
that, we can't. How are we going to show up and talk to people? So like
mm.
understand what resonates. Be a researcher. Be a researcher to your business people.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I'll give you one example of someone that we're looking to hire right now, contract role for a UX research, so more maybe qualitative market researcher. They're trying to better understand sales.
Yeah.
And you talk about want to get close to the money. Like that's as close as you can get. We have a new sales leader, and they've got a lot of questions, and I don't have a lot of great answers for them. And so I'm like, great, let's go do some research on it. And for us, it's about understanding. Hey, we won a bunch of business, which is great. Why did we win? Like we kind of know the sales team has a bit of an idea, but we could actually go on some research and find out. And we've lost some deals. Why did we lose? Um, but also we got some renewals on some deals. Great. Why did they renew? Did they actually renew, or there was kind of like this? People renew for all kinds of reasons, and so massively helpful in onboarding this new person into the organization that then ties this understanding that research is there to help them, to support them, to help them be successful. And I think in every company should have effectively a growth researcher, even just working on sales. Like what a huge opportunity that exists in the world. Great.
Yes.
Well, hey, we're running so close to time, and I want to make sure we get to a couple of questions from the audience because I know we've covered a few of them, but we've got a few things missing. John Whalen has left, so we're not going to answer his question anymore. That's what you get for leaving early. I get it. Uh, I guess. Geez, there's so many questions here that are so good. Any questions we don't answer, we're actually going to take some time off, and Nikki and I will answer them and actually send them out as a part of the post recording, so they'll all get answered in here. Maybe you can talk a bit about data protection. How should we be thinking about this in this world? How to make sure it's protected, making sure keeping people safe. Yeah.
Yeah, don't be dumb. Sorry, don't be stupid with data. Like just like you wouldn't like literally like hopefully send it in an email to your mom or dad or friend or anyone. Don't put it into AI unless you scrub all the personal identifiable information. There are ways that you can do that. There are ways that you can still synthesize your research while being really smart and safe about it. Trust me, I have done those things where I've either scrubbed all the information or I've pre-analyzed something and given AI essentially like a scrubbed version of it of like, okay, I've analyzed this. These are the things that I'm seeing. Can you help me like kind of sense make some of this information? But like what I would just make sure that you're doing. And like, this is where it's like, talk to a legal person in your organization to like truly understand this. Like don't leave it up to like the Yahtzee and like hopefully like it's not this isn't one of those things where it's like ask for forgiveness rather than permission. This is one of those things where it's like go to your legal team and actually talk to them and say, hey, if I want to like utilize this in our research team, like how do I do it properly? Like, is it with this kind of information or that kind of information? So I think it's just being like, we are all hopefully ethical researchers. We all understand the risks that we have with the information that we hold just
Mm.
naturally. Just having it on your computer is a risk. So like de-risk it as much as you possibly can, right? So like take all of that information out and like just talk to somebody from legal, ask AI about it, like also ask your colleagues about it, right? Like talk to people to understand how they're utilizing it. But I, for one, scrub any PII
Yep. Yep.
just off of that.
I think that's essential. And I think this is part of the, again, self-serving comment, but this is part of the reason to go and work with tools that care a lot about data privacy and security. A great question. We ensure that none of your data is used for cross-training by these models or our own models. We strip all PII before it goes anywhere near a model. So any emails, phone numbers, social security numbers, a bunch of other, anything identified as PII, we're stripping it out before it goes anywhere near the model. And then we have a data deletion, program built into the product so that actually what's happened with the data afterwards. And then finally, we then have the ability to go and create sub workspaces. So you can say, look, this is really sensitive stuff. I want to make sure the PM intern doesn't go anywhere near it. And then finally, I guess you can also then decide who can and can't access the AI functionality. So you can turn it off as a whole across the organization, or we can say everyone but the PM intern is allowed to use this, including the Ask AI functionality. Hey, we are at time. We've got some great questions. One of my favorite ones that we will be answering in the email follow-up is, how do you communicate to clients the value you bring as a researcher when they say, we know AI can make this 50% shorter. Why do we still need to pay you the same amount? But we will answer those in the email when we send out the recording after the fact. I just want to say thank you to Nikki. You're awesome. Really appreciate this. This has been great. You can find Nikki at userresearchstrategist.com. Her newsletter and podcast are available at User Research Academy Substack, and we'll link to those as well. We'll also be sharing links for the waitlist for Nikki's upcoming book about category research and the AI prompt library, which will be released in just a few days, which I'm sure you're all going to be hungry for. I want to say congratulations to our giveaway winners, Delia, for winning the Running Research t-shirt. Awesome, super exciting. The only other way to go and get this is by participating in one of our run clubs, which are running periodically at various research conferences, the next one being UXDX and then Config. And Celine Guillemot for the great question jacket, which you can see is very spiffy here. And it's got got everything on the back. Thanks, y'all. So good to see you all. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you, everyone.